Good morning and welcome to the verse of the day plus here on the 28th of January 2020. Today, the verse of the day comes from John chapter 4, verse 24. God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. I think it's fairly simple, straightforward. If you're going to worship God, worship Him in truth, knowing that He is God, which I wouldn't see why anybody would. And in spirit, from your spirit, just not your physical body, but from your innermost being, worship Him as well. I would say that is what that means when I think about it right here, right now. I'm not sure whether I can say I've ever thought about that before. So, I guess the verse of the day is done. We will move on to the book. Chapter 10. What's behind idolatry? We need to unwrap the mystery of idolatry. It won't be quick or easy, but unraveling it will be revealing and beneficial on many levels. The greatest benefit will be acquiring the knowledge needed to detect it in our lives. It will give us the upper hand in our awareness of spiritual kryptonite. Let's begin by looking at its roots. Recall our first chapter in the book in this book that God has planted eternity in our hearts. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11. Every person on the planet is born with the innate quality. Paul affirms this by writing, even Gentiles, unbelievers, who do not have God's written law, show that they know his law when they instinctively obey it without even having heard it. They demonstrate that God's law is written in their hearts for their own conscience and thoughts either accuse them or tell them they are doing right. Romans chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. Here's the truth. Everyone instinctively knows God's way because it's written on our conscience from birth. That's because of obvious. This is because obvious to Lisa and me while raising our four boys as infants, even before being taught not to, they would have a look of guilt after striking their brother, throwing food, throwing a tantrum with their parents, or other similar behavior. Not only is the knowledge of God in each person's heart, but it's also evident in everything created. They know the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them through everything God has made. They can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power, his divine nature, so they have no excuse for not knowing God. Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. Ponder the emphasized words in these two separate verses, obvious and clearly see, which leads to no excuse. Here's the reality. There's no justification for a human being to be ignorant of God. He has made himself known to anyone who is honest and desires truth. Have you ever heard someone ask, but what about the person who's never heard of God in the remote parts of Africa? How can they be saved? How could God condemn them to judgment? These questions, often statements of protest, are cop outs for what they really know or what they aren't willing to learn. In their conscience, they know God is real, but reject the truth. They aren't willing to know is that his knowledge is available to all who seek truth, completely honest questioners who would have to admit they are denying him. The psalmist further confirms creation's non-stop voice declaring God. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Right night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or a word. Their voice is never heard. Their voice is never heard. Yet their message is gone throughout the earth, and their words are all over the world. Psalms 19 verses 1 through 4. The knowledge of God's vast greatness is declared continuously throughout the entire world, each second of every minute, each minute of every every hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Wouldn't you say that covers the ignorant man in remote Africa? A person can put on a facade and live as though they're ignorant of God's existence, but the truth is not only implanted in their hearts at birth, but continuously speaks to them day after day, night after night. Unless someone has reasoned away, convinced themselves otherwise, and ultimately seared their conscience to the point of becoming a fool, they cannot escape his reality. The critical juncture occurs the critical juncture occurs when a human being either chooses to seek the living God or satisfies this desire by turning to a God or gods, thereby relieving his or her conscience. You may know you may now be thinking, I live in the West. Gods are not a part of our culture. We don't have statue icons, temples, or anything else along that lines. Please stay patient with me. I will indeed show that the West has various gods, no different than other cultures. How do these gods originate? We must keep in mind mankind has created all all gods or idols. A human being is completely compelled to satisfy this inborn awareness of God, along with the need to remain in good standings with Him. If an alternate version of a deity is created, then whoever crafted it determines what's necessary to please the God, and that the deity will provide or allow whatever its inventor desires, all the whole satisfying the inborn need to worship. Now listen to what Paul goes on to say. Hello, ATM Fall Off Boy. Yes, it is. We could do sometimes get into some deep stuff on Verse of the Day Plus, going through the book Killing Kryptonite. Haven't seen you in a few weeks, but it's good to see you. Uh, yes, they know God, but they won't worship Him as God or even give Him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. As a result, their minds became dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they instead became fools. And instead, exams are annoying. Yes, they are. Uh, and instead of worshiping the glorious, ever living God, they worshiped idols. Romans chapter 1, verses 21 through 23. Just seeing how many pages I got to this chapter because I usually split the chapters in two. Okay, the building of the image, the idols, is not the focus here, but only the consequences of a deeper problem. Not worshiping Him or as God at this point is crucial to establish what true worship is. If we think of the church's worship team leading a slow song, we will totally miss the message here. The truest definition of true worship is not music and singing, but rather obedience. As an author of several books, I've learned when I'm introducing a fairly unfamiliar term in a book, I have to give its primary definition when I introduce it, either by directly defining it or using it in a way that perfectly illustrates the word's meanings. The same is true with any author, and God is no different. If you look at the most widely accepted translations of the Bible, New King James, English Standard Version, I'm not sure what that one, New American Standard Bible, and New International Version, to name a few. The first occurrence of the word worship is Genesis 22:5. Abraham is speaking to his servants, informing them as to what he and Isaac are about to do on the mountain. Abraham states, the boy and I will travel a little further. We will worship there. What was he going a little farther to do? Was it to sing a slow song to God or gather some musicians and singers to lead a worship service at church? Not at all. He was there to obey what God had told him to do 3 days earlier, to sacrifice his only son. The NLT uses the word worship in Romans 1:20, chapter 1, verse 21, while a few others translations use the word glorify or honor. All the words are related. We glorify and honor God or any other authority when we obey. We denigrate or dishonor when we don't obey. We can give lip service, brag, and praise, write songs about, and so forth. But if we don't do what God desires, we insult Him, which is the antonym or the opposite of worship or honor. There was a day God said to His people, I hate all your show and presence. Away with your noisy hymns of praise. I will not listen to music of your harps. Instead, I want to see Instead, I want to see a mighty flood of justice and endless river of righteous living. Amos chapter 5, verse 21 and verses 23 through 24. Righteous living is obedience to his authority, not what we determine is godly living. Under his old covenant, God instructed Moses concerning acceptable offerings to him. There were a variety of sacrifices his people could bring him as a form of worship. A lamb, see Exodus 29, chapter 29, verses 39 to 41. A bull, see Exodus chapter 29, verses 10 to 14. Grain, see Exodus chapter 29, verse 41. And many others also could burn a holy incense called frankincense in the tabernacle and temple as a form of worship. See Leviticus chapter 2, verse 2. Yet one day God said, "Hey, Argos, for sure, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." I am reading through a book called Killing Kryptonite. It's a Christian book. I guess you could say self-help book or whatever, you know. Although I'm not sure whether self-help really defines it right, but anyways, yeah. One day God said, "I will bless those who have hungered, who uh, have humble and contrite hearts, who have trembled at my word. But those who choose their own way will not have their offerings accepted. When such people sacrifice a bull, it is no more acceptable than a human sacrifice. When they sacrifice a lamb, it is as though they have sacrificed a dog. And when they bring an offering of grain, they might as well offer the blood of a pig. When they burn frankincense, it's as if they have blessed an idol. Isaiah chapter 66 verses 2 and 3. Yeah, I've been going through this book for the last couple weeks. Well, since the beginning of the month. Monday through Friday, reading about half a chapter a day, Monday through Friday. After I do a verse of the day and give my commentary on it. And it's like a spiritual kryptonite, what weakens us spiritually. Well, and more than spiritually. It's pretty good, and I'd say so far. Uh, he begins by identifying those who come under his blessing, those who tremble at his word. This describes some who ranks obedience as a supremely important issue. They will be the ones he gives his attention to. Then he turns to those who claim their own way to worship, obey him. Not only were their acts of worship not accepted, but also were equivalent of human sacrifice, cold-blooded murder, or dog sacrifice, pig's blood, and a blessing of an idol. These actions are abominable in his eyes. If someone actually offered these detestable things or committed murder, they would have been cut off from the community of Israel or punished by death. That's a decisive, strong and decisive. So obviously their worship was not. Yeah, John Bevere is good. I've read one of his other books before, The Bait of Satan. let's see. Uh, so obviously their worship was not worship at all, even though it was in accordance with the instructions of worship that they were given in the books of Exodus and Leviticus. The Message paraphrases and states it this way: your acts of worship are acts of sin. Remember, these are his covenant people, the ones who received his promises, who did. Why did they hear such foreboding words? Because of worshiping their way was not obeying him. The same is true for us. We can sing songs to God, attend worship services, or profess our allegiance to God, even in accordance with prescribed ways in the New Testament. But if we don't have the foundation of obedience, our worship is really not worship at all. Aren't we told you must live as God's obedience children? First Peter chapter 1 verse 14. The other root problem Paul mentions is not giving God thanks or ungratefulness. If we believe we are entitled to a certain lifestyle, deserving of certain material things, or expect some sort of status, we are self-focused and consequently unthankful. After all, we've worked hard, planned, set goals, dreamed up what we've accomplished or created, so we have a feeling of pride in our own labor. Okay, so that's where I'm going to end this part today. We'll finish this chapter tomorrow, and we will go over the questions for lesson 2 in the back, which were supposed to be 4 through 7. Oh, I did 4 through 7. I think we're on 8 through 10. Kryptonite. So I hope everybody is enjoying the read through this book bit by bit. I hope people are getting stuff out of it. Um, and I thank everybody for coming by. Just a quick nudge to my uh, book. If you can check it out on Indiegogo, The Canadian Shield, #1. There's tiers, I think, for everybody. You know, it goes as low as $5, and the biggest one, of course, is uh, 1,500. And Argos, if I'm right, you own a comic shop, right? If you want, contact me. If you want to put it in your store, contact me. Maybe I can work out something, a tier or something for you for get you them a little bit cheaper. If you want more than one, than just for yourself. If you want it, that is. So I guess that's it. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. Remember to hit the like button, share this out, comment in the comment section afterwards if you're watching this afterwards. And have a great and wonderful day. Bye for now. God bless. Love you all. Okay, there was somebody I thought had a comic book store or ran a comic book store. Oh, maybe I'm thinking Brad. Pencil for Life. I get some people confused. Do you need the link? I'll just put the link in if you want it. There's the link if anybody wants it. And yeah, so bye for now. God bless. Check out High Noon. I will be doing some layouts for issue 3. So bye for now. God bless. Love you all.